Kazakhstan produces nearly 90 million tons of oil annually and accounts for 13% of Europe's crude supplies. This figure is set to rise as the country ramps up production, thanks largely to its giant Western-led Tengis-Ölfeld. Is Kazakhstan planning to expand its oil exports to the EU? And what is it doing to remain a reliable supplier of crude?
Welcome to East-West Connect. We're highlighting business and economic developments in Kazakhstan and the wider Central Asia region, connecting with Europe and beyond. Kazakhstan is the EU's third largest non-OPEC oil supplier. Last year, the country exported nearly 3/4 of its crude to Europe, amounting to almost 70 million tons. Here's a breakdown of the largest European importers of Kazakhstani oil. Italy dominates, importing 26.3 million tons. That's more than quadruple the volume sent to the Netherlands, which ranks second. Romania, France, and Spain trail behind, each importing less than 5 million tons. These figures are expected to change as Kazakhstan has increased its production to an average of 2 million barrels per day this year, up from 1.8 last year, with a target of reaching 2.1 million by 2026. This growth is largely due to the nearly 43 billion euros expansion of the Tengis mega oil field, which in February alone accounted for almost half of the country's output. To put the scale of Kazakhstan's proven oil reserves into perspective, Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan each hold just under 600 million barrels, whilst Azerbaijan holds 7 billion. And Kazakhstan leads the region with 30 billion barrels, producing around 2% of the world's oil. 70% of Kazakhstan's oil comes from its three main fields, the onshore Tengis and Karachaganak and the offshore Kashagan, all located in the west of the country. Joining us now to discuss Kazakhstan's output strategy is oil and gas industry expert, Mr. Askar Ismailov. Mr. Ismailov, welcome.
Thank you for inviting, and good to be here.
What does the recent surge in Kazakhstan's oil output signal for the European markets? Does it mean that Kazakhstan is positioning itself to boost exports into the EU?
As we know, currently Kazakhstan and Germany is discussing to ramp up transportation of Kazakhstan oil. And also we keep in mind that Kazmunagas refineries increasing its oil production. So when we say that Kazakhstan increases oil production, the first markets as more interesting for Kazakhstan will be taken into account to provide those amount of oil to Europe.
And how sustainable is Kazakhstan's recent production ramp-up?
I think it is sustainable due to, as we know, those projects uses best practices and technologies. And also it's in interest of Kazakhstan itself, because any huge increase makes some difficulties in market itself. I mean, world oil market. So it's going to be very smooth.
What measures do you think the government is taking to ensure that Kazakhstan remains a reliable supplier of crude to the European market?
Minister of Energy is always in connection with international oil companies that represents, as I said, in major oil fields. Also, Kazakhstan is negotiating with Germany, so I think they're doing their best to keep online all this conversation and negotiations.
Great having you with us. Thank you for your insights today.
Thanks again.
About 80% of Kazakhstan's oil exports flow through the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, which runs through Russia. Other routes to the west include the Ataral-Samara pipeline and an alternative corridor that passes through Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey. Here, oil from Kazakhstan's major fields is delivered to the port of Aktau. From there, it is loaded onto tankers and transported across the Caspian Sea to a terminal near Baku. The crude is then funneled into the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline and delivered to the Ceyhan terminal on the Mediterranean coast. We talked to the company in charge of moving Kazakhstani oil across the Caspian and the open seas to the European markets.
By 2026, Kazakhstan will cover nearly all of its oil exports via the Black and Mediterranean seas. Kazmortransflot, the national sea carrier, is expanding its fleet to 8 tankers to meet 90% of maritime demand, delivering from Russian and Turkish terminals to Italy, France, and Romania.
Задача Казмоторфлота состоит в том, чтобы эффективно и безопасно транспортировать нефть на международные рынки. Это включает в себя как Каспийское море, так и открытые моря.
Last year, Kasachstans transported a record 13 million tons of Kazakhstani oil in open waters, the highest annual volume in its history. 11 million tons were delivered via the Black Sea and another 2 million from Turkey.
Данное увеличение связано с увеличением транспортировки нефти по Актау-Баку из объемов Tengis-Ölfeld. То есть вместо традиционного маршрута по трубопроводу КТК он переправил часть нефти в направлении Актау-Баку, которая далее транспортируется по трубопроводу Баку-Тбилиси-Джейхан.
With Kazakhstan boosting oil production and Kasachstans expanding its fleet, the country is well positioned to supply more crude to international markets.
Kazakhstan's production surge has not been welcomed by OPEC+, the group of oil-producing nations that aims to regulate global supply and influence prices. Analysts say that the oil alliance has pushed the overproducers to scale back and penalize countries that exceed their quotas by letting prices fall. To help us understand the impact of OPEC+ cuts on Kazakhstan's oil shipments, we're now joined by Asylbek Jakiev, an expert who has tracked his sector closely for years. Mr. Jakiev, welcome.
Thank you very much.
How have OPEC+ restrictions affected foreign investment in Kazakhstan, if at all?
From one side, Kazakhstan has to fulfill this OPEC obligation since Kazakhstan signed this agreement. But from another perspective, Kazakhstan has own national interest. In Kazakhstan, 3 super major oil fields. These fields are operated through a PSA, production sharing agreement. So Kazakhstan doesn't have too much control over these fields and over these operators of Western companies, because since these PSAs are signed back 30 years ago.
Just to elaborate, what are the main challenges in meeting these OPEC+ targets?
Kazakhstan has to agree with these majors. Yeah. It doesn't mean automatically that these investors or these companies that work in Kazakhstan will agree with the government. Just to say that, look, guys, you need to limit your production within 5 or 6 months because we have OPEC+ agreement. It doesn't appeal a lot. If you take last 30 years, oil and gas sector brought more than $100 billion of investment to the sector, and Kazakhstan produces daily about less than 2% of global oil production. So it doesn't affect so much the balance of supply and demand.
Mr. Jakiev, I appreciate your time and perspective.
Thank you very much.
Kazakhstan's rising output is poised to shift the energy dynamics in the EU and may even deepen the country's strategic partnership with the bloc. Bye for now, and join us in the next episode of East-West Connect.